Welcome to the 2025 Porsche Macan Electric, the first fully electrified Macan in the Porsche lineup. There is so much to go through, so this might be a longer video. I'm hoping not, but let's just get straight into it with some baseline numbers, and there's a lot of them. So 100 kilowatt per hour battery, of which 95 kilowatt per hours are usable. We have 382 horsepower here in the Macan 4, and 402 horsepower if you use launch control, and 479 pound-feet of torque. There is a Macan Electric with rear-wheel drive, there's a 4S, and then there's the turbo at the top, and that rounds out the 4 different offerings for the Macan Electric. It's got a 1-speed gearbox, and this specific model has 495 kilometers of range, so says Porsche Canada's website, with the asterisk estimated by Natural Resources Canada. I went on the Natural Resources Canada site today, which is February 23rd, and the 25 Porsche Macan Electric is not there. The 24 is there, and that had 496 kilometers of range, so let's just call it 495 to be safe. From here, let's get into the other options really quickly. There is the turbo, and that gets you 630 horsepower, 833 pound-feet of torque, and that's at the top of the lineup, which is just a bonkers number. I don't even know where you go to utilize that. And the 4S, which is just above this, has a realistic, I guess, power output of 509 horsepower and 605 pound-feet of torque. Let's jump into the charging speeds. So level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 goes at 11 kilowatts per hour. Takes it 10 hours to go from nothing to 100. Level 2 goes up to 135 kilowatts, 33 minutes to go from 10 to 80%. And then the level 3 fast charge goes up to 270 kilowatts, 21 minutes, and that's from the 10 to 80% range. It's running off Porsche's 800-volt architecture, same as the Taycan. You can get adaptive air suspension here. We can raise and lower the vehicle. The off-road setting has it at its highest, and you can go low or even lower. There's 3 settings here, so versatility is definitely included, and it's not new for the Porsche brand at all, but it's nice to see they've done it here on the Macan. A first here for the Macan is 4-wheel steering, and again, nothing new for the Porsche brand, but it's cool to see it here for the first time on the Macan, and it just little added versatility. Let's touch on the cargo side of things before we go into driving impressions. There is a front trunk, and it's got 84 liters of cargo space, so fairly usable. And around the rear with those rear seats up, 540 liters, put those rear seats down, and that almost triples to 1,348 liters. So how does the 2025 Porsche Macan Electric drive? Just as you'd expect for something with explosive power and Porsche's famous handling. It is such a joy to drive. And yes, you have all that extra oomph, and while there's no replacement for displacement, or so the saying goes, with this being fully electrified, just the amount of available power beneath your right foot is so explosive. And you know, even a light tap like that, and I'm already up 15 kilometers from where I was, and because those batteries are underneath the vehicle, you have that better center of gravity, so it really adds to the handling side of things. But that's kind of expected, and I'm not dismissing the amount of power here. This is the second lowest output, where the regular Macan Electric has rear-wheel drive. This 4 has all-wheel drive, hence the 4. So you know you're getting something that drives well and performs well, and it's extremely quiet within the cabin. Yes, part and parcel with the electric side of things, but even at higher speeds, road noise mostly stays out of the cabin. What the big deal here to me is, overall, and relating to the driving side, is the practicality side. Almost 500 kilometers of range is a good, safe number. Part of the obstacle for people wanting to, or at least consider flipping from internal combustion engines to EVs, is the range. It can be a solid daily driver. If you are in urban conditions, the 4 is fine. If you want something with more power, 4S, you want explosive and just bonkers power. Look at the turbo side. But I like this trim for year-round functionality with the all-wheel drive. Nothing against the rear-wheel drive with a solid set of winter tires, but I think a lot of Canadian drivers want to have that all-wheel drive system. And again, not taking away from how the Macan Electric handles or drives and how it does twists and turns so elegantly and really has that flat and planted feeling. That's the build inside. You know, it'd be weird if any Porsche didn't have that. It'd be especially weird if their best-selling vehicle globally didn't have that as well. So can it be a daily driver? Absolutely. Is the almost 500 kilometers of range more than enough? Absolutely. I like what Porsche's done as far as creating something familiar and not making it wildly different from a gasoline vehicle. And sometimes manufacturers that have both internal combustion and EVs, it's like night and day. But it seems like a lot of consumer behavior leans toward, we still want a quote-unquote traditional looking vehicle. We just want it to be propelled by batteries as opposed to gasoline. Looks are completely subjective, so I won't stay too long on this. It still has that very familiar Macan shape to it. Not quite bubbly, but just enough soft sweeping curves on it to give it that nice look and feel of elegance. This has a paid upgrade for larger tires, and they're staggered. There are 22s on here, and they're winter tires, but even still, they look and fill out those wheel wells so nicely. Weird thing, on the build sheet, I saw a $410 charge for a rear wiper. Odd it's not included. Check that box every single time, because a rear wiper is one of the best aspects of a modern vehicle. Onto the inside, and with Porsche's new design language, they have the 12.6-inch instrument cluster. It's curved, there's no hood. When I first saw it on different Porsche models, I was a little weary. I'm like, well, how are you gonna stop all that glare? And there's no hood, and that's what the hood part of any digital instrument cluster does. But they've engineered it so well, and it's angled just enough, and it's curved, and it looks so good. Glare has not been a problem for me all week. And then over to the right, we have the 10.9-inch infotainment system. Again, part of Porsche's new design language, easy to use, no problem in finding all of your information. There is an optional 10.9-inch screen for your front passenger. With this Macan 4, there are 3 drive modes, technically 4. There's the off-road, normal, sport, and sport plus. Depending on what you want, how you drive, where you live, what you do, what you like. You know, that Sport Plus can really, really be something fun to play around with. I think the majority of drivers will live in the normal world, as the power output and drive feel is still very on brand for Porsche. Very quick, very brisk, very athletic. Again, hangs on to twists and turns and curves with absolute precision. No slipping, no moments of, oh, is it oversteering? Is it understeering? It does exactly what you want to do, and that's what you expect out of a Porsche. Thankfully, the HVAC controls are not embedded into the infotainment system. There are some physical switches as well. There's a capacitive touch console in the middle, as is the case with a lot of the new Porsches. And I would happily take that over the having to dig into the infotainment system to adjust the direction of my air. And really everything else. Last 3 things will be pricing, competition, and the future of EVs, not just with Porsche, but in the industry overall. And it's not going to be a massive deep dive into it, but there are some points I would like to make. So please bear with me on that. But let's go to the easy-ish stuff first, which is pricing. So the rear-wheel drive Macan Electric starts at $94,900 for a Canadian MSRP. What we have here is the Macan 4, and that's at $99,300. Macan 4S, which gets you a little more power, $106,900. And at the very top, the turbo electric $127,800, again for a Canadian MSRP. I can't think of a single person that I know with a Porsche that has gotten it just as is out of the box. So you'll be adding I imagine maybe a handful of things in the option sheet to bring that up. So that takes care of the pricing side. Now, let's go into the competition. And it's a bit of a mixed bag, and it'll lead into the future of EV conversation I'd like to have. So there's the EQE, there is the EQ6 e-tron, there's the iX, the GV70 electric from Genesis, the Cadillac Lyriq as the ones that come to mind as the primary competitors here for the Macan Electric. Everyone has a specific thing that they do extremely well. I think if you are looking at an electric vehicle in this class and size, and driving dynamics are at the top of the list for what you have to have, not would like to have, but like these are your mandatory things, then the Macan Electric should be at the top of your list because again, it drives just so astonishingly well. You know, it's been hard to pick out any flaws as far as driving dynamics go, knowing that it's their smallest SUV/crossover, knowing that it's also their first foray into the electric world for this class of vehicle. And finally knowing that Porsche's pretty much built a reputation for decades on offering some of, if not the best driving impressions, driving dynamics, and drive feel in the entire industry. Porsche, like a lot of other brands, had really bold ambitions for the electrification of their lineup. You know, for example, Porsche was looking at having 80% of their sales be electric vehicles by 2030. I don't think that's going to happen. And the same thing with Volvo and Ford and GM and Mercedes. The wrench in the plan has come both through the change in consumer behavior and government policies as well. And I realize that a $5,000 federal rebate can be a lot for some electric vehicles. In luxury space, not so much, because it's such a small percentage of the actual cost of the vehicle itself. You know, that $5,000 federal rebate in Canada will be sorely missed by mainstream manufacturers and consumers looking to get into those. Luxury world, you're spending a little more to get a little more, well, to get a lot more. So that's a small part of it as well, but it's hard to pinpoint a specific reason. And is public charging a cause of it? A small one, because if you have an EV, 9.9 times out of 10, you'll have a level 2 charger installed at home. So I don't think it's the public charging that's the big culprit here. And, you know, most EVs have respectable range between 400 and 600, and you know, the further we get in the technology, the longer that range is going to turn into. Porsche has come out and said in Q3 for 2024, they're rethinking their strategy as to how to move forward. And you know, things may not be just either gasoline or fully electric. I think there'll be a stronger mix of hybrids and a stronger mix of plug-in hybrids. And Porsche's looking into e-fuels, which is a blend. And you know, there are so many internal combustion engine vehicles out there, and it's not as easy as flipping a switch and going, okay, we're done with ICE and we're going to jump into the EV world. It's a transition, and with anything, there's going to be growing pains. It's hard for me to see by 2030, even 2035, having such a high number of electric vehicles on the road as was first targeted. And I think it's just coming down to the consumer behavior side. And not that EVs are a novelty in any means. You know, a lot of manufacturers are doing relatively good sales numbers with them. And, you know, as an example, not comparing it to this, but the Hyundai Ioniq 5N won the AJAC Automotive Journalists Association of Canada, their award for EV of the Year. BMW's i4 also picked up a best EV that's not an SUV of the year. Sorry, best electric car of the year, and the 5N1 best electric SUV of the year. So I think that we'll see more gasoline offerings from Porsche, the same way we'll see more hybrids and plug-in hybrids as opposed to EVs. And there's a time and place and market for electric vehicles. I just don't think it's going to be as high as what was initially forecasted a couple of years ago. Taycan sales were down 50% worldwide in 2024. And yes, it's a bit of a niche vehicle, but a 50% drop is still a 50% drop. So I realize I've been going on a little longer than usual, so much for my opening statement of trying to keep this video short because there's a lot to say, but it's an important conversation to at least start. And I would be thrilled to hear from you in the comments as to what you think the future of electric vehicles is between now and 2030. I don't want to go any further than that. I think the next 5 years will be very telling. I think it'll be very impactful, and it will really pave the way for what 2030 to 2040 looks like. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're already here as a subscriber, thank you so much. Connect with us on our social media outlets. We're on all the major ones. I thank you. I appreciate you. I applaud your patience if you've made it all the way to the end of this video without skipping anything. And most importantly, thank you for the support. Without you, there's no modern motoring. And I look forward to... I almost got that whole thing. You know what? I'm going to keep the flub. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.